Good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am excited to introduce the Youth Research Council, an initiative I've been a part of for the past 2 years. And to begin, we're going to give brief introductions of ourselves, and I'll start. My name is Dushma Arambold. I'm a first-generation college student, Asian American 11th grader, attending Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology.
My name is Selena Abogaith, and I go to Washington Liberty High School in Arlington, and I am in 12th grade, and I have been in the YRC for 2 years now.
Hello, my name is Sparkmoy Ahmadzai, and I'm currently a sophomore here at Mason, and I have been involved in YRC since senior of my high school. I'm also a first generation college student.
Hi, my name is Mina Ahmed. I am a senior at Centerville High School, and I'm also a first generation college student.
Looks like Iceland didn't make it. So Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Marta. I'm a senior at Washington Liberty High School, and I've been with the YRC for 4 years.
Hi, my name is Ahmad Sargan. I'm a junior at Justice High School. It's my first year in YRC, and I'm also a first generation immigrant.
Hello, my name is Eden Mutegia Kwade. I'm a freshman at Loudoun Valley High School, and I'm an IB student.
Hello, I'm Rihanna Vardhanapu, and I'm a senior at Westfield High School. I am a first generation Indian American, and I've been part of the YRC for the past 2 years.
All right. So we as a council are focused on amplifying student voices in critical research areas related to our school experiences and our environments. Basically, our primary goal is to collect and analyze data that affects us directly, on issues that affect us directly, and making sure that student perspectives are the forefront when talking about school climates.
So, what is the Youth Research Council? So, the Youth Research Council, or YRC, which was founded and launched in 2021, focuses on conducting research on issues that matter to young people. We have worked with over 130 students from more than 30 schools and 8 school districts across Northern Virginia, and are looking to expand student involvement to address a broader range of issues that impacts young people. We follow a youth participatory action research, or YPAR, to promote this model. This approach centers youth voices and empowers students to investigate and address issues that directly impacts their community.
So the YRC is made of individuals from different backgrounds and experiences. Each of us brought our own ideas and insights to our discussions, which enriches our work together. So at the start of the YRC, it was very important to set these goals to create a positive and productive environment. So essentially, we started by writing down what makes a good discussion and how to be respectful to each other. So this process helped us understand the importance of listening and valuing each person's perspectives. So from there, we developed the core beliefs of the YRC. So all of us, we agreed on several points. So first, we wanted to hear from everyone and appreciate different viewpoints, and we strive to make real change in our community, as well as we believe in representing youth voices and ensuring that they are heard. Additionally, we want to be open-minded with one another, showing strength and focus in our work and respecting each other's personal experiences. By outlining these core beliefs, we set clear values that guided our research initiatives, which helped us to stay focused on what truly mattered.
All right, so I'll pause to let you guys read the mission statement for like a few seconds or so. So, our mission basically reflects our commitment to amplifying the voices of youth, especially those who may feel underrepresented or overlooked. We lead our own research projects, and we aim to identify key issues in our communities and address them in ways that make them tangible, that make them have a tangible difference in our community. We're not just gathering data, but we're creating a platform for voices that are often unheard, and we share insights that can help shape real change.
Okay, so why the Youth Research Council? So this is a quote from Sarah Burhay Abaraha from Washington Liberty, and she's an alumni. She says, the act of acknowledging, identifying, and further exploring social issues that are pertinent to my daily life encourages me to see social issues as something that might be worked through rather than a perpetual reality. There's power in giving people a space to be heard. By creating that for ourselves and exploring the depth and gravity of social issues, we've invested into our ability to work towards a better future.
So what Sarah means by this quote is basically that the YRC is not just a space where or an area where we collect research, but it's also an environment that allows the participants along with the people that we get the data from to share their voices and amplify the issues that they see in their communities. Throughout the YRC, many of our members can attest to feeling like we're able to actually do a change and see the issues around us that we had maybe previously not ignored, but just not noticed. And through the YRC, it's not just about collecting research, but really opening people's perspectives to these issues that we see in our communities. So when choosing our research question, we like to start off at the YRC by sort of looking at what ideas we believe are important. And so on the left, what you see is an activity called Ripples of Change. And this is an activity that we've done every year, but started off at the very first meeting of the YRC back 4 years ago. And so what we do is we start small in the center. So these are things or issues that we see individually, whether it's with ourselves or individual others, but what issues we see in our daily lives. And then we move on to community, schools, and then globally and maybe internationally issues. And so what this method does is that it allows us to start out small with what issues that we see attainable in our daily lives, and then get bigger into these themes. And what we found throughout the flashcards was that we actually found broader areas that connected, and this helped us see what research question we could develop based on our common interests and the common areas that we wanted to research into. And so on the right is another method that we did where we decided to draw little comic strips, starting with an issue at hand and then how we went along to show that issue and maybe make awareness or get to a possible solution for that issue. And both of these activities just helped the YRC look at the topics that we wanted to directly address and help us formulate that research question for attainable research.
Yeah, so as Sarah mentioned, we aim to narrow the scope of our research to a topic that felt both relevant and urgent in our daily lives. And this led us to three main initial research questions. The first being, how are students' experiences in school shaped by race and racism? This first question helped us to better understand the backgrounds and the lived experiences of the students that we were collecting data from. And as you can see from the quote in the picture, which states that I laughed it off so I didn't cause trouble, it shows that a student's personal reflections can reveal the influence of race and racism on their daily lives. And in this picture, it shows how they chose a state of complacency so that they didn't cause trouble or disruption in their school. And much like this response, our other responses showed us that our research focus was on the right track because we were able to identify these issues that students were facing. And the second question was, what are the impacts of race and racism on students' mental health? Here we wanted to identify the implications of students' experiences with race-related issues and how these experiences can affect their mental well-being. And so we chose to focus specifically on mental health because many of our youth researchers were interested in understanding how policies or the lack thereof kind of impact students' emotional states. And the third question was, how can Northern Virginia public schools better support students of color? This final question tied together our findings and kind of identified the actionable steps that we aim to identify from our first two questions. And by examining the answers from our first two questions, we were able to identify ways to address the racial inequities that these students were kind of talking about, and in turn, improve the mental health outcomes for these students. And now I just want to talk a little bit about one of the core impacts that we focused on with these questions, which was microaggressions. Microaggressions are defined as comments or actions that express a prejudiced attitude towards a marginalized group, mainly racial minorities. And this was one of the recurring themes with our research finding, which is why we kind of tied it into our initial research questions. So now I'll talk a little bit about the research methods that we used throughout the course of the past couple of years. So we mainly used 3 different methods. And the first was mixed methods data collection, where we combined arts-based data collection using the photo voice method, as well as data analysis on what we collected. And so specifically with the photo voice method, we had youth researchers create art to represent their experiences and perspectives. And it was typically paired with a brief narrative or reflection on how that experience stood out to them, so we could kind of take from the art and the words that they were portraying and kind of see how that reflected on our overall research questions of how race and racial identity affects a student in the school setting. And the second method we used was hallway interviews, where researchers would just ask their friends and peers questions in their hallways at school about their identity and their experience with microaggressions. This was a great method to kind of get immediate data, but it also limited our data collection to a specific space and location, which is why we also had our third method of surveys. Through this, we created a Google form with a series of questions about the interviewee's location, ethnicity, gender identity, and other aspects of their identity, as well as their experiences of school safety or lack thereof. And through these 3 methods, we were able to collect data from a broad group of students and youth in the Virginia area, but also stay on the scope topic of school safety.
So a part of the findings aspect of the YRC is that we like to turn the data and the different conclusions that we reach into more of a perspective kind of point of view and a way that others can easily read and easily understand a certain message. So we have a series of images with posters that we make, and these are what we do at a couple of meetings towards the end of our year for the YRC. And what this one says is it has the different races from our survey and asks the question of how much they felt excluded based on their race. And so what you see in this is that after all of the minorities experience feeling excluded more than the white participant group. However, African Americans did experience the most exclusion at school.
So this other piece of artwork serves kind of as a reminder of how exclusion remains such a deeply felt issue within, our society and us, like in schools as a whole. When we talk about inclusion in schools, often you're kind of thinking about policies or slogans, but what this artwork kind of shows is how it pushes us to consider what the personal lived experiences behind those slogans are. Each statistic that we've collected represents real feelings of people who have felt isolated, people who have felt moments where they feel unrecognized or unwelcome in their own school community. And so as we try to understand the underlying factors, like what leads students of color to feel excluded, it's often a combination of subtle messages that peers, staff, and even the curriculum can leave them feeling marginalized. This exclusion may lead them to feel left alone and may be reflected in everyday interactions, whether students feel listened to, acknowledged, or represented in the school's activities or their environment.
Just like the previous two slides, so this one kind of goes into depth. So in our research, we did many surveys, so within the schools. So from this data, as you can see, we found that teachers and administrators are nearly 40% responsible of the issues related to microaggressions. However, the majority of these incidents originate from the students themselves. This shows that the students play a significant role in contributing to microaggressions within the school community.
So, just one interesting and significant finding that we got from the results of our preliminary research is that microaggressions were reported in classrooms as occurring the most rather than the other areas that we had predicted. So, when we think of a school setting or a high school setting, usually you would think that maybe these microaggressions would be happening in hallways or other areas with peers. But it turns out that classrooms where students were going and had to be there to learn was where the microaggressions mostly affected. And what we also found that was interesting was that 25% of these encounters were caused by teachers or faculty of these school systems. And while other students were the ones that were causing most of these microaggressions, 25% is such a significant amount that it draws attention to why these microaggressions are happening and where they're coming from in the beginning. And it brings up an important question of what needs to be done to change the occurrence of these microaggressions in these settings. So what we have here is a method called data blitzing. And what we do at the YRC with data blitzing is it's basically a fast and also relatable and accessible way to get data from other students. And so while we do have our survey to get data from, texting allows us to get qualitative sort of interview style responses, but at a much faster and maybe less official setting, which allows for more genuine responses as well. And so what we do is a lot of us, or all of us at the YRC, will go through our contacts and just send out really quickly text with the questions or the research question that we are looking at for either that day or that year. And so some of these responses, for an example, just to show, is one time a teacher mispronounced a student's name on purpose to provoke him after being corrected. Some students felt that they were targeted during lessons on 9/11. Some talked about witnessing teachers say the N-word. And then one response said that they had a teacher call the country my mother is from a hellhole due to it being in the Middle East, despite correcting him. And so what you can see is that from these data blitzes, we can get fast, quick, and a large number of responses in a pretty effective way. So just to go over some key findings, the expectation is that teachers are meant to advocate for and promote equality among students. However, what we tried to show you before and that we found now is that 31% of students have reported that they've experienced a microaggression at the hands of a teacher and also other school faculty. And significantly, or more specifically, students identifying as Black or African American reported over 50% that teachers were perpetrators of microaggressions. And so this brings up the genuine concern, like I talked about before, of why these experiences are happening at the hands of teachers. Because if you think about it, these students have to be at school and they are legally binded to be in these settings. And you can't just decide in the middle of a classroom if you feel uncomfortable that you can just leave, because that raises another issue with school policy and all of that. So what can we do and what can school boards do or school policyholders do to fight this experience and to lower these numbers?
So now I'll go a little bit into the implications of the data that we collected and that we synthesized. So the data suggests that while the term microaggressions often imply a subtle or small scale act, the impact on minority youth is quite substantial. And this kind of begged the question of, are these quote unquote microaggressions if they create such unsafe environments for many students? And this was noted specifically in a quote from a former research fellow, Sarah Berhea Braha, who said, and I quote, "I noticed that these teachers/staff were some of the aggressors, and I was wondering if they were held accountable because it is not okay if anyone is racist, but it's even worse if a teacher does it to their students." This observation or quote kind of raised a critical point about accountability, especially when it comes to teachers and staff and school faculty, because this top-down power dynamic kind of increases the harms of microaggressions, especially when students often look up to these people of power and guidance, especially teachers. And when these trusted figures kind of contribute to the discriminatory practices or microaggressions, these consequences can go beyond microaggressions and lead to emotional and long-term educational harm, which limits the goal of a safe and inclusive learning environment that we hope to promote as an educational system.
Okay, so as we consider the implications, it's crucial to reflect on some deeper questions about safety and comfort in schools. So based on the findings from our first 2 years of research, we developed additional questions to guide our continued study. At this point, we don't really have answers to these questions, but they are essential for understanding safety and comfort in schools. For the first question, who feels comfortable in schools and who feels safe? 2, how does safety look different to different students and in what ways? And 3, what can school adults do to help students feel safer in schools? So these questions emerge naturally from what we observed, and they'll help us guide our ongoing work to build a more inclusive and supportive school environment.
So, as was mentioned earlier, school safety is a huge major area of focus in our research. We conducted a comprehensive school safety questionnaire with 137 responses from students across 21 high schools. As well as that, we ran peer-led text interviews, which gave us 282 responses from students at 25 high schools. Now, these responses allow us to get a multidimensional look at how students perceive school safety. One key finding that we got from both data sets was this disconnect about the adult perspective and the student perspective of what school safety is and how resources should be allocated accordingly. Schools are investing heavily in physical security measures like safety detectors, metal detectors, and other really intimidating safety measures. But students, as we find in our studies, particularly students of color, they express that these measures often make them feel more targeted rather than making them feel protected, as if they are supposed to be caged up as opposed to being protected. These security measures seem to heighten this feeling of surveillance. It reinforces this feeling of mistrust instead of fostering, a welcoming environment that should be the standard for schools. Repeatedly, students have told us that genuine safety comes from different sources. It's either a metal detector, or the choice is between a metal detector or a school counselor. A student will choose a school counselor 100% of the time. A supportive and inclusive school climate would be conducive to propagating this feeling of safety among students. Students value caring teachers who make eye contact, learn their names, and take the time to understand them as individuals. For many, diverse counselors also allow them to feel the sense of relatability, and they are crucial in providing a sense of belonging to the students themselves. Moving forward, our aim is to use these insights to advocate for a more balanced approach to school safety, one that respects both physical security, but also emphasizes that feeling of interpersonal relationships and emotional security.
Okay, so as we said, we found that safety isn't just about physical security, it's also about having that sense of control over your environment and well-being, and this includes emotional and psychological security. And that safety is also about having an environment where individuals feel empowered to influence their surrounding outcomes, as well as having mutual respect with one another and having the comfort to be yourself.
So this picture kind of focuses on three main aspects. The first being policies preserving reputation, the second being status quo, and the third being the narrative or illusion of quote unquote safety. So first I'll focus on policies preserving reputation. So when policies or lack thereof prevent teachers, administrators, and others who are in positions of power in the school setting from being held accountable for their actions, their reputations are trumping a anti-discriminatory environment, which should be ensuring that students, regardless of their identity, have a equal and pleasant educational experience. And so the second reason or second point is the status quo. So when there's a lack of action in a clearly problematic area, especially one that's been supported by research, these problems will remain and may even become exacerbated from current events or students taking advantage of the lack of policies to address the issues. And in order to prevent this, research like what we have done needs to be discussed and shared with people of power so that equity and inclusion in the educational space can become the new status quo, and kind of show progress in this field. And the last point that this picture includes is the narrative or inclusion of quote unquote safety. So when we disregard data that clearly shows a pattern of microaggressions, we can create a false sense of security in a way in these school environments. The solution of safety can come from more tangible implementations like metal detectors, which a fellow researcher stated that it can oftentimes instill a sense of fear instead of a sense of safety among students, which kind of shows how tangible policies are not necessarily fixing the solution of safety, but they kind of create an illusion of safety in the school environment. And by failing to acknowledge or address these issues, or a lack of addressal of these issues, we can kind of risk perpetuating a feeling of unsafety in these school environments.
So as we discussed school safety and our findings about students' perspective about their safety in the school atmosphere, we bring some recommendations to the table to help improve school safety to help students feel more safe and included. Although our study was conducted in Northern Virginia, our findings are applicable to schools everywhere where students' experience and mental health are shaped by microaggression. Based on our findings, we have a few key recommendations for schools in general. First, we suggest authentically prioritizing students' well-being and recognizing that this won't look the same for every student. Second, we recommend reallocating part of the budget from target hardening, things like metal detectors and security officers to social workers, counselors, and their training. This shift could help create a more supportive and inclusive environment for all students. And as safety is more than physical safety, and it's also about psychological safety, as my peers mentioned.
So in continuation to that, the next recommendation that we have is humanize your students. So take time to see them as individuals and build genuine connections. The next one is take time to authentically care for your students. So pause to ask them how they're feeling and listen to their responses. Make sure that they're feeling heard and seen. Number 5, care for yourself as you do. So you have the capacity to do this work. So prioritize your own self-care so you can be fully present for your students.
So we have 3 main goals. Our first one is to share our research findings and recommendations for change as broadly as possible. We're not just conducting research just to collect data for our own personal use. We want to make sure our insights and our findings are use to reach those that can help drive real change. We can highlight issues and amplify more youth perspectives and provide actionable recommendations that address the needs of students. That leads on to the second goal of focusing on connecting with key groups, such as school leaders, policy and decision makers, and peers. By engaging school leaders, we can discuss ways that make our findings part of school policies and day-to-day practices. And our last goal is to create impact. Now, this is a fairly broad statement, but what we mean is that we're aware that there are barriers and constraints to change, from budget limitations to policies that are so ingrained within, the educational society or the educational system that it's really hard to get them out. But we believe that presenting evidence-based research, amplifying youth voices, and partnering with others that are invested in improving our schools, that we can overcome these challenges over time. Our outreach strategy isn't just about awareness, it's about building partnerships and inspiring action that makes a difference within the educational system and schools within our community and perhaps worldwide.
As the fourth year of the Youth Research Council has approached us, we will be starting new chapters in the University of the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, and Queen's University Belfast in Belfast, Northern Ireland. We will also be holding a worldwide convening for the Youth Research and Advocacy in Washington, D.C. at the University of the District of Columbia on April 5th, 2025, as more details will be forthcoming. Thank you for listening to this slideshow. You can contact us at yrc@gmu.edu, and our website is below that. Thank you. Now we'd love to answer some questions.